So I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar. If Senator Adetunbi has come on, I'd like to hand over to him. Hello, Senator.
Yeah, good afternoon. I believe you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and guests on this afternoon webinar. My name is Adetunbi, Senator representing Ekiti North. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. I'll be serving as the moderator for this afternoon's discussions. As you probably know, this is a platform organized by the Nigerian Institute for Economic Research, NISER, in collaboration with PERL, which is a UK-funded project in the country. And we are gathered this afternoon, distinguished lady and gentlemen, to respond to a rhetorical question which NISER has thrown at all of us. And it's a big question, as a matter of fact. Is Nigeria in the eye of a perfect storm? Well, I'm not going to answer that, because that's why we have a panel of eminent scholars and thinkers to help us to unravel this big question. But before I go further, let me recognize that Nigeria is currently facing major challenges along some traditional and new fault lines that we're all familiar with. We are currently going through an economic recession. There is COVID-19, which is coming on and off, spiking and re-spiking. We recently survived End SARS protest, which is an awakening of our youth to challenge the elite leadership of the country to think differently about the problems and solutions to the challenges of the country. I believe there is a war going on in the northeastern part of the country, which some people will like to call insurgency, but actually this is a territorial war, and Nigeria is losing territory. We have the issue of banditry in the northwest, kidnapping everywhere, particularly in the southern parts of the country, and in the entire middle belt, which is a major food basket of the country. There is conflict for land, water, and resources by cattle herders and indigenous farmers. And that has led to loss of lives and some threat to peace all over the country. So I think the question that NISER has thrown at us is a well-founded question that deserves some reflection. That is Nigeria in the eye of a perfect storm? This afternoon, we have our panelists, which I'm going to introduce briefly, because I believe we are fairly familiar with each other. The Minister of State for Budget and National Planning is currently occupied at the Federal Executive Council. I believe he might be able to join us directly or through representation. But we have with us also Professor Fumi Oloni-Shakin, who is the Vice President and the Vice Principal International and Professor of Security, Leadership and Development at King's College. I believe she's here with us.
Yes, I am. I'll just put on my
Welcome,
camera. Thank
Professor.
you.
Thank you for responding to this invitation. My friend, Dr. Juaba, we met in similar circumstances yesterday, and here we are again this afternoon. Dr. Juaba is the Nigerian Country Director at Development Alternatives International, a reputed development consulting firm that is doing serious interventionist work in Nigeria. Originally a barrister, Joe gained extensive experience in governance sector and had a very successful career in the UK Prime Minister's office, worked for several years as a UK DFID expert in state partnership accountability project, and is currently doing development work now as a service provider. Dr. Folarin Gbadebo-Smith is the host of this platform. Maybe at this point, in the absence of the minister, I will like to invite Professor Olonishakin to make some opening remarks. I also am told that you are limited by time, so we probably want to give you an earlier voice before your other commitments take over your time. Professor Olonishakin, you have the floor, please. Is Nigeria in the eye of the storm?
Thank you so very much. I think the question has been well set for us. And Senator Adetunbi, it's so good to see you again,
yes,
albeit virtually. Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be back in this forum, and I think I owe our host, you know, a debt of gratitude for bringing me back to a second part of this seminar series, which I think is, you know, much needed for where we are as a country. What I want to do is to immediately say that I do not think, I want to respond to his question. Yeah, I do not think we're yet in the eye of a perfect storm. And maybe, thankfully, we should be thankful that we are not yet there. I think that provides us an opportunity to do precisely what we're doing now in order to arrest the situation and intervene in a very meaningful and hopefully effective way to prevent the worst. I hear myself echoing. Am I echoing at your end?
No, you're fine.
All right, okay, thank you. So, you know, in a sense, therefore, I recognize that 2020 has been the kind of year that it's been with the coronavirus disruption globally, but also, of course, with the kinds of existing challenges that we have in the country. Senator, you already listed some of them. I think there is no region of the country, if you look at the 6 regions, that is not afflicted by one socio-economic stroke security condition or the other. The difference is a matter of degree, not substance. Notwithstanding that we have acknowledged, you have also acknowledged what is happening in the North East, in fact, in the North as a whole, as not an insurgency, but some kind of territorial occupation. I acknowledge all of that, but I'd like to focus on those sort of tensions, those areas of tensions and fault lines that would deal with, that have, if you like, convergences and divergences that might put us in the eye of a perfect storm. One of them is the demographic change. We have been going through this demographic transition for a while as a country. It has an enormous amount of advantages if we make it work for us. I think we've seen when countries like South Korea, for example, have been through this kind of demographic transition, they have made the most of it. So the youth bulge that we're experiencing in Nigeria at the moment is not just the preserve of Nigeria. The African continent is the only region that will continue to grow in leaps and bounds until 2050 in terms of population of its peoples. And Nigeria, as we all know, is likely to be the 4th most populous country for some time, but of course, massive competition coming from Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania. But those who will double the population of Nigeria for sure have been born. And short of rounding them up and shooting them all at once. I think I commented on this in a sense last time, just short of rounding them up and just literally killing them all off, those who would double our population have already been born. And that they also account for the average age of 19.5 years. And in that respect, there's no point in kidding ourselves that there's any kind of homogeneity in this band of young people. However it is you define them in policy terms, whether you're defining them as under the age of, up to the age of 35 or up to the age of 24, they're not a homogeneous group. They're also diverse by class, by gender, and a whole range of things, ethnicity, but there are certain things that connect them, a great deal. One of the things that connects them, and that's the kind of variable on that we have, where we have to look for an intervening variable as we discuss next steps for the future of Nigeria, is that of unequal life chances. Unequal life chances such that we have not seen it, I don't think, in our country for some time. If we're to believe some of the data being released about poverty in Nigeria, that number has gone up tremendously. I think we're close to the bottom of the scale. So let's put that there. The second thing that connects Nigeria to other parts of the Sahel is ecological. So what we see in the north and what we see in the surrounding regions, even though this particular phenomenon has been really attributed to local conditions, grew as a result of local conditions. If you look at the movement across, if you look at the corridor from Chad, if you like, to southern Nigeria, depending on what you're looking at, you can look at the corridor to Mali as well. You see the movement of people in such dimensions that for thousands of years, we know people have moved for ecological reasons. And that movement now has attached to it all sorts of security concerns. It's always actually been that way if you look at the Sahel. But Nigeria is really intricately linked to that movement of people in a number of dimensions that we cannot but take into account. And therefore there's complexity to the issue. And so when you then begin to look at the farmer-herder crisis, which actually attaches itself to those conditions within the country, but you attach it to this whole question of unequal life chances, and you then look at the spate of kidnappings, you look at all of those things. I argue very strongly, and I think others have argued as well, that they are part and parcel of the same question of inequalities and social injustice. They have manifested in different ways. And the reason why we're not in the eye of a perfect storm, as it were, luckily, is because the narratives that have framed why those conditions are there, those narratives have never, ever converged. They've converged only marginally. So what do I mean by that? Because this is one area of intervention that I want to put on the table. There's a lack of convergence in the narrative around how the problem is defined, even amongst all of us. A lack of convergence. We've defined this problem in many different ways, but there's a culture of governance that really stagnates the response, and I will try to close along those set of points. But the second thing is that those that are afflicted, that are most afflicted by the challenges that we talk about, are themselves, not only are they not defining the problems in the same way, they don't actually see it. And they do not connect their problems together. It is separated. In fact, if you look at End SARS and the patterns of response and the dynamics in the youth response in the South, it was vastly different from the North. And if the separation of those narratives and if those narratives ever converge, my goodness, the storm. So to answer Professor Gbadebo-Smith's point, we would be in the eye of a perfect storm when those narratives converge, both in the way we define it and in the ways in which people understand their experiences and their marginality. So we have all sorts of marginal people and marginalized peoples too in our country who have not yet seen their problems in the same way and have not identified the enemy collectively When we see that identified collectively, and when I make the last set of points, we then might begin to see whether, we are nearer that perfect eye, in the eye of the perfect storm, or we're further away from it. Those are the two, to my mind, the two most significant factors that affect whether we're there or not. And to the last set of remarks that I want to make, I want to talk about those independent variables that we're not necessarily in control of, which are likely to take us, nearer to the eye of the perfect storm. And it has to do with the patterns that evolve in the next 12 months on this COVID question. The patterns of its impact and how we're able to respond to it, the capacity to respond to it or not, or whether, of course, the impact stops for Africa in a particular way. The second, of course, is technology. The second is technology. And I think there is nothing we can do about the capacity of technology to assist us or also to disrupt us. And it can disrupt us if it begins to connect itself, or we allow the dynamics that we've just described to be connected to mobilization of the whole of society in ways that we've never seen before. And I hope that really the government has it as a strategy only when they talk about the ability to control communication and stop people from communicating, because that's never ever going to happen. And I think it's important to bear that in mind. The very last thing, and it's not so much of an independent variable, but it's more about the culture of how we govern. I'm not even talking about the structure itself, but the context, the culture that governs the behavior of our governing elite and the behavior of the people as well. And that culture is one that is going to shift, I think, in a very radical way if the patterns of End SARS. And Senator, I wish I was as optimistic as you are. I think the underpinning rationale, justification for End SARS movement remains. And I'm not even sure that we have survived it. And I think that is the thing that is sitting in front of us at the moment that we need to respond to in particular ways. But we've never had a governance, a culture of talking amongst ourselves about the terms on which we will live together. And that's what has created the unequal life chances that we see. And if we're going to define the problem of security, governance in our society going forward, that has to be based not only on questions of state capacity, I think I referred to this last time, but also on questions of trust. And the absence of it means that we have created pockets of people with nothing to lose, as well as pockets of people who look at their life's chances in separate ways. I think that's the single most important conundrum, how the governance arrangement in Nigeria responds to the tying of the independent variables, technology, this virus, to those other factors, the fault lines that you've spoken about already, whether it's demography, whether it's the ecological factors, whether actually it is the structural conditions of unequal life chances. Every other thing that we see are things that are movable in the tectonic plates. They're not really the real problem. They're the manifestations of those deep structural divides that we've never really dealt with. I'm going to stop there, and I really thank you for giving me a chance to speak. Thank you so much.
Chairman, if I may come in at this point, perhaps I should have done this earlier, just by way of some recognitions. We have with us Senator Udoma, former Minister for Budget and National Planning. We have the DG of the Debt Management Office. Maybe we should have put her on the Q&A, just to deal with some of the issues that may arise. And then we have Director Politics Governance, ODI, and I'd like Miani Booker to take a couple of minutes before I speak, if you would permit him, to introduce, say a few words about their program. But you know, I'm back to you, Chairman. I'm back to you.
Yeah. Maybe we should yield the floor to Booker Miani at your instance before I roll on to the moderation. Booker Miani.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for this. I think since we've already started talking, I would just go ahead and speak a bit about this. It would have probably been better for us to do it at the tail end, but just to say that I heard LEAP, which is the Learning, Evidence and Advocacy Partnerships, is a third pillar of FCDU's PERL program that was mentioned earlier and is working with NISER to support in this webinar series. Just to thank everyone who has set out time to come and join us, and to say that for us, it isn't just about providing support on the back end for platforms such as this, but the pertinence of the conversations that are taking place all over the country, and especially on a platform like this, put together by none other than NISER, that is the government's foremost think tank to provide sound thinking, evidence and advisory to decision making around socio-economic and other development matters, means that there's one place to engage with one another and one place to be to provide support. This is it. So if you got the flyer and you saw the FCDO logo somewhere and then you're wondering why it's there, this is the of faces I have not seen in a very long time, and we just thank everyone for joining us. Towards the end, I'm sure around concluding remarks, a thing or two will be said around the housekeeping of what happens next, what to expect as a result of this session and forthcoming sessions, and how we would continue this conversation going in a constructive manner. Thank you very much, and over to you, Senator.
Thank you very much. I think Professor Olonishaki has given us a lot of food for thought, but we must watch for the convergence of this myriad of challenges. And I'm going to encourage the audience to start preparing their questions and sending it via Zoom chat box so that we can attend to them at appropriate time as we move on. At this point, I would like to call on Dr. Joe Abba to make his opening statement. Dr. Abba.
Thank you very much, distinguished Senator. It's great to see you again. Twice. And we were at an event yesterday and someone was saying, oh, you're being too hard on the legislators. Senator Adetunbi will not talk to you. And I said, no, Senator Adetunbi is an intellectual and a friend. And he understands this cut and thrust that we do on issues concerning Nigeria. It's a real pleasure to be on this platform talking about issues. And I want to start by respectfully disagreeing with Professor Olonishaki on the first answer she gave as to whether Nigeria is in the eye of the perfect storm. Not with regards to everything else she said, but with regards to her first answer. And that disagreement is probably founded on our understanding of the term. You know, what is the eye of the perfect storm? And to my mind, the eye of the perfect storm is actually a place of calm, but it's a place of deceptive calm. So you feel that, oh, nothing is happening, you know, and this storm has ended, and then you're not aware of the maelstrom of violent forces that this deceptive calm is hiding. And so if I use that definition, I will say that Nigeria has actually been in the eye of the perfect storm for a very long time. Whether that convergence that Prof talked about would happen, which will now trigger social unrest, or how it happens to trigger potential social unrest, is another matter. And I'll say why I think we've been in the eye of the perfect storm. And I've actually been experiencing what I'll call latent discontent for a very long time. And that latent discontent is the same thing that Fela sang about when he said we were suffering and smiling. You know, it's that same thing. We're suffering, but we're smiling. And the fact that we're smiling could give the impression that all is well, but actually it isn't. And that has been there a very long time. And this latent discontent is often as a result of an anxiety among citizens that the state of society is precarious and it's not getting better. You know, things are getting worse every day. And I'll use about 10 factors to back up what I mean. The first is a loss of confidence in our human capabilities as a people. And so it doesn't matter what initiative you come up with, the Nigerian will say it will never work. They are going to chop the money. Even when, as head of a private company, we advertised jobs that we didn't have to advertise. We advertised because we're looking for people who could do the job. A lot of the comments was they've already shared it among their children. And I'm thinking, well, I'm a private sector company. Why would I bother to spend my money and my time to advertise when I could just put my child in without any restrictions? So we feel that loss of confidence. And people will say to you, you know, this is a useless country. For 60 years, we cannot even manage electricity, right? So there's that feeling that there are things that others are doing that we cannot do. And people will tell you, oh, go to Ghana, go to Benin Republic. They have 24 hours light. We are supplying them. What a country. That's usually the end thing, what a country. Or they will say Niger. The Niger statement is a statement of hopelessness. Then there's a feeling of a lack of ideology, that people don't actually believe in anything, particularly the elites. And so I often say that it is the young people that fight among themselves in terms of partisan politics. And there's actually no division at the top. And because there's no division at the top, people are able to move freely from one party to another party and back to the previous party with no sense of guilt, no sense of ideology in any way. A lot of our people, particularly our young people, feel a loss of political power. Why should I bother to vote? My vote doesn't count anyway. If whoever is going to be president in Nigeria just needs to be decided by the party, you know, whether the presidency goes to the south or to the north or to the east, it doesn't matter what the rest of us think. That is what is likely to happen. So because of that, people will not bother to vote. On election day, you see the streets taken over by young people playing football. And then people will sell their votes, and people will think, okay, the vote selling is as a result of economic hardship. And there's an element of that because people say, well, we only see these politicians once in 4 years. So now that we see them, I better collect the 2,000 for my vote because I don't know when next I'll get it. But in another sense, the selling of votes is also a protest against the system. A protest that you don't actually believe in the integrity of the electoral system. That's why you think, okay, let me just collect the 2,000 or 3,000 or however much I want to sell my vote for. What a lot of people don't realize is that if your votes don't count, the politician will not need to buy it. They will simply go and write the result like they used to do in the past. But this disconnect between actually your votes count, and that's why they are paying for it, that's why they are buying the votes, and that you actually have the power to use your vote to make a difference. That disconnect is very, very apparent. There's a loss of sense of nationhood, and you see a lot of young people curse Lord Lugard for the amalgamation of 1912 and say, you know, we shouldn't be a country at all. What they don't then do is push for a sovereign national conference or an opportunity for us to debate our nationhood and agree on what kind of country we want to be, and then craft a constitution that follows the kind of country that we want to be. There's great socio-economic vulnerability. Nigeria is a place that if you don't have, you don't have. There's no middle ground. You can actually physically die of hunger in Nigeria. And so you find that people are less forgiving of other factors. You know, there was when it was announced that Nigeria went into recession, I said something like, oh, you know, COVID-19 has had this devastating effect on us. And by the way, our FAC revenue for October also fell dramatically, you know, which of course suggests limited economic activity. You needed to see the abuse. How dare you say that it is not Buhari's fault? How dare you say it is not Buhari's fault that we're in a recession? Because people need someone to blame. They need something to blame. And of course, while the economic policies of the government may have contributed, there isn't one single factor that was responsible for driving the country into recession that was so unique in Nigeria that other countries such as India and other places, they did not go into recession, they did. Then there's a sense of nostalgia that things used to be better. So people believe that anybody above the age of 50 was served full chicken at every meal in university, was given free milk. They had their clothes washed for them. They had bursaries, they never paid a penny. And again, while that may have been the case for people that went into the university in the early 70s, everybody above 50 is tarred with the same brush. You know, you guys enjoy the best of Nigeria. You didn't even leave the dregs for us. You people were able to travel abroad without visas. You destroyed the country because by the time you met it, the Naira was stronger than the pound. And look at where we are today. Our education system, you guys have destroyed it, and we all want to move to Canada. Then there's a certain hopelessness that upon all of this, they won't even leave us alone. They won't leave us to watch our big brother in peace. They will keep attacking us for one reason or the other. Why won't they just leave us alone? And then when you think about whether this phenomenon is new, it's not. You know, we grew up being young people, also hearing these stories about how easy and how comfortable the people that went before us were. And we also migrated in the late 80s and early 90s. So nothing that's happening now did not happen before. The one major difference is the role of social media, because people are able to feed this narrative of hopelessness over and over again on a daily basis. And you know, you probably be aware of what's known as the Thomas theorem, which says that if men define situations as real, then they are real in their consequences. And so if you constantly project an image of deterioration and hopelessness, that image will become real in the minds of many, and they will act accordingly. There's also the echo chamber phenomenon, which is the fact that most of our newspapers and journals these days get their messages from social media. And so everybody publishes the same thing. Nobody does any fact check. And so again, you get this reinforcing narrative about how bad things are. And anybody that tries to promote any sort of good news is immediately shut down as an enemy of society and as an apologist of government. So what are the consequences of all of this? The consequences are that it places pressure on the legitimacy of government. It makes people doubt whatever government wants to do and government's sincerity around that. It opens up an avenue for politicians actually who can tap into this narrative to sell a different idea and a different vision of what Nigeria could be. And then in extreme cases, it can actually lead to some citizens completely disregarding their morals and being unable or unwilling to tell between right and wrong. So I'm going to make money even if I kill someone. It doesn't matter what I do. If there are protests going on, I'm going to break into even private companies and loot it. It doesn't matter whether there are palliatives stored there or not. This is an opportunity for me to get back at the system. So I actually think that we are in a precarious situation where it will be completely inappropriate not to reflect on some of these things and remove as much as possible those triggers that could see it move from latent discontent to public outrage and unrest. That convergence that Professor Oloneshaki was talking about and with which I agree. Thank you, moderator.
Joe, thanks so much for that very, 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 very insightful and very deep analysis of state of affairs. I love the way you have summarized it as an uneasy calm that seems to suggest a latent discontent. And that's a very key operative word in the summation of what you have said, that there's some, graveyard silence that is unsettling, given the existential challenges that the country is going through. But I see a convergence between yourself and Professor Oloneshaki. You've identified a completely different set of fault lines and evidences of worrisome situations in any polity. But I think the next issue for us, and I would like Dr. Folani Gbadebo-Smith as the DG of NISER, is supposed to be a solution provider and also helping government to figure out what do we need to do of challenges that Dr. Oloneshaki has listed and which Dr. Joe Abba has also listed. One agrees that, yes, we are not yet in the eye of the storm. The other says, we're actually there. It's just that people are waiting for that public unrest and outrage, as it were, the public expression of the latent discontent. Dr. Gbadebo-Smith, I would like you to open your thoughts, but leaning more on way out. What's the way out to prevent this outburst that seems to be ticking like a time bomb?
Thank you very much, Senator. Clearly, there are many ways to look at this question. One thing is clear. One thing is obvious. There are rumblings in the air. Poverty, disease, separatist movements, insurgencies, terror, whether sponsored or spontaneous, are on the rise. Most of these elements have been repeatedly identified. And the two speakers before me have very elegantly and eloquently made points that speak to different aspects of what I think to be one huge elephant in the room. I will come at this from probably a more technical point of view, because the chairman, the senator, has asked me to offer solutions, which is, I think, a very onerous task. So where we stand now, the major indices of development, happiness, well-being continue to decline in Nigeria. HDI has dropped, poverty has increased, Nigeria's standing on the fragile state index has declined considerably over the years. And clearly we are moving in the wrong direction. So the question, I suppose, is what do we do about this? I looked at many options to model the Nigerian situation, and I've tried everything from growth diagnostics. If you allow me to do a bit of screen sharing. Right. So this is what a growth diagnostic tree looks like. And we can wander all over the tree looking for what is wrong. Is it education, money? Is it governance? Fumi's talked about the governance conundrum. I mean, is this the social media, or is this in fact foreign powers acting to hold us back? First we need to disaggregate the problem thoroughly, and then see what it is we can in fact wrap our arms around. There's another way I've tried to look at this, which to most people will probably make very little sense. And this is the systems dynamics approach. It just kind of tells you about the complexities and how vast they are. When you look at a diagram like this, you ask, where do we even start? This, by the way, is the complexity map of Afghanistan, which looks very much like Nigeria in the Northeast. And there are all sorts of forces that play the same forces, institutional, outside support. Do the people in the locality support the government? Are they against the government? In fact, what nation do they belong to? It is becoming a question. And to look at the complexity map from a different point of view, there are several states of affairs. This is something that we need to understand, that in different parts of the country, there are different states of equilibrium, all of them low level, none of them optimizing growth or optimizing for what we can understand to be development. Now, back to the question of the eye. I decided to take a look at this or bring in this satellite view of a hurricane. This right here is the eye. And if you look at it, there are no winds, there are no forces at play in there. It's just another zone of calm. If you ask a Nigerian, what's the state of affairs in Nigeria, you'll get one of three answers. Everything is fine. We have weathered all these storms before. After all, we survived the Civil War, we survived Ebola, and we by the grace of God, we survived COVID. If you ask some other people, the naysayers, so to speak, you'll get an answer like the country is going to hell. Everything is falling apart. Look at the exchange rate. It's unbelievable. Everyone is leaving for the UK and Canada, you know. And the third group, of course, is the largest group of all, which is the faith-based group, who will tell you that it's all in the hands of God. And God willing, things will correct themselves. Senator says I should offer solutions. This group believes that there are no solutions to be offered, and we should simply wait on God. Meanwhile, the media oscillates between doom and gloom and a manic optimism. We have seen the reality of End SARS, COVID, oil prices collapsed before us, and we are still wondering whether to move forward, what to do, and so on. I'm sure everyone here on this platform is aware of the predictions that were made about Nigeria earlier in the decade, that Nigeria would collapse by 2015. This was attributed to the US National Intelligence Council, and some say to the CIA. What you may not know, of course, is the fact that such predictions are not, that was not the first. The first came out in a paper from the Air University in the US, the University of the US Air Force. Their prediction was that by 2030, Nigeria would see collapse. Now, we have to take a deep breath and say, first it was 2030, now it's 20, then it was 2015. Are we actually there? Is this storm we face about to make landfall and destroy everything that we know today? And then you ask the question, Senator, what can be done about this? What is the entry point to this complex of events? This peace we enjoy today, what does it really mean and how long will it last? I think at this point I can begin to attempt an offer on not solutions, that would be too, I'd be stretching too far. My hypothesis is that you cannot stop this train of events suddenly. Things have simply gone too far. But we can, in fact, slow it down. We can slow this storm down enough to adjust our trajectory. In doing that, we must understand the forces at play in some detail. And I think a lot of people from the macroeconomists and their macro models have looked at this. The growth diagnostics people have looked at this and said, this is the reason we're having all these problems that we have today. But to return to the metaphor of the storm, we as Nigerians must find ways to slow down the winds that are driving this storm. The temptation is to think of the coming storm as a single event, but I believe that would be a very major mistake. In nature, sometimes small storms coalesce to form a single giant. This was a storm that approached the US coast. It came as 5 different mini storms, but when it hit, it destroyed all of Louisiana as we know it today, and the rest of it we know as history. So we're asking ourselves the question: is this a series of small storms that we should worry about, not worry about? Clearly, in my view, the question is mute. We have seen what End SARS looks like. The victims of the destruction will talk to you. There are several different types of equilibria depending on the geography of the region you are in Nigeria. And sometimes the storms are economic or they are social in nature. Behind all this are a series of things that intensify or soften or deflate the storm. So I looked at this thing called a velocity map. It kind of speaks to the pressures that drive natural storms and make them intensify. To understand this better, let me talk about some things called accelerators. Because it is important that we grasp this concept of accelerators, because it is these accelerators that we can actually modify. We cannot modify the events. We cannot modify the fact that Nigeria has become fractured. We cannot modify the fact of 36 states, maybe instead of 12 or something. Those things are historical and they are established. But we can begin to look at the elements that drive this instability we are beginning to look at. So I'm going to actually list out some of them. Population growth. The rate Nigerians talk about our approach to 250 million in the year 2030 and 400 million in the year 2050, almost as if it's an event to celebrate. These are major events that will, if not managed or slowed down, will definitely cause this storm to destroy everything. Things like COVID-19 show up, but those are transient events that may or may not repeat. Then you have inflation. People can't buy food, they go to the market, food costs twice what it costs the day before. You have things, Fumi has mentioned climate change, government policy. Joe mentioned social media. And I'm talking about things that are unseen, things of the nature of isomorphic mimicry. We put in all these structures, but they don't function. We have courts that take 20 years to decide a case. On the face of it, you have a legal system. But does that legal system work? Now, if we don't get hold of the system and actually make it work, we are going to see a speeding up of these various issues. Then you have events like corruption or issues like corruption, which are both a cause and an effect, a driver, a pressure, and a result all in one. Then you have the responsibilities of government. Little things like the messaging people get from government. SARS came, people blamed the government, there was violence, people can't trust the government is doing its best to manage a situation that is fast deteriorating. Messaging and signaling is one of the biggest issues that drive an issue such as this situation we are finding ourselves in. And then, so it becomes a question now of how do we slow down these accelerators? Because these are the things we actually can fight against. We can fight, we can present government policy, we can change the messaging that's coming out of government. It has to be more carefully crafted. Can we do something about corruption? It's already been attacked and attended to. The NISER is getting more oversight visits this year than the whole of the last 3 years wrapped up together. So everyone is on his toes now. And for those who think that there's no change, there is change. We feel it. Policymakers, I think, have to address themselves to the speed of decision making. It's going to be a critical issue here. We cannot wait for a year before addressing the questions that the End SARS movement has thrown up. And there'll be that tendency to go to sleep on the part of policymakers and just go back to business as usual. We are not in the reckoning as far as COVID-19 is concerned. I've not heard a single discussion really about how we are going to deal with the coming of the vaccine, our cold chain, and so on and so forth. So speed and scale become a real issue. But in closing, my argument is that all we can in fact do is to slow the accelerators down whilst government makes effective policy to alter the economic and social trajectory of Nigeria. My last slide, and I hope I've not spoken too long. My last slide is this slide, which attempts to actually identify the various nodes, this time not the accelerators, just the nodes that are at play. I can make this slide, I can animate this slide, but I think I'll spare everyone the angst of looking at my weak attempts at animation, you know. So each of these elements constitutes a mini storm of its own. And the question is, how quickly are these things and which of them are going to make landfall first? Thank you, Chairman, for giving me the opportunity. I hope I've not gone overboard with my own technical presentation. But this is my take on this problem. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Director General Dr. Gbadebo Smith, for that very, very techy, high-tech presentation. It has thrown more light and illustrated some of the issues in more graphical forms. Thank you very much. Between, yes, we are not there. There is need for convergence of challenges to we are there. It's just that there's a latent discontent. Now I hear Dr. Smith agreeing that we're actually in a form of a storm that needs to be slowed down, and things are getting more interesting. So the audience will have the floor at this stage, because I know some of us have been posting remarks and questions to appropriate quarters. I'm told that a chat box has been opened for this purpose, which is being managed by the organizers of the platform. And I will be moderating these open discussions along with Dr. Smith, who will avail us the information that we have gotten from our audience in terms of comments and questions. And as the case may be, we might be referring to any of the lead speakers to respond to some of these comments and questions. So at this point, I would like Dr. Smith to take us through some of these questions and share it with the audience at large.
Thank you very much, Senator. Dr. Adebayo Ajala comments as follows. Whilst we do not have convergence of narratives on the problem definition and an understanding of our experiences, should we be looking at these issues from the perspective of people, victims, or the governed? Must we as stakeholders in the policy environment wait until there is a convergence? I think that question goes to Dr. Oloni Shakin, if she's still here, because I know that she has to teach a class.
Yeah, I think she sought permission to exit, okay. But I probably would like Dr. Abba to respond to this, because this emanated also from our discussion yesterday, and that is, what is the demand side of good governance? There's lack of elite consensus in Nigeria about visioning and the pathway to development, and the absence of development is beginning to affect the efficiency of our democracy. And people are saying, what does the demand side look like? What can the people do to stir up action and make effort for government to be more alive to its responsibility in the area of service delivery and what we popularly refer to as dividends of democracy? Dr. Abba, would you like to shed more light on that?
Thank you, distinguished Senator.
Yeah.
Very interesting question and a very difficult one because I often say that the demand side of governance is the side where all of us are in, because we all experience governance on a daily basis. And even if you have even governors with a convoy of armored vehicles have been attacked, just like anybody else can be. But I think there are a few issues. I think that we place far too much emphasis on politics and not enough on governance. And the distinction I make between the two is that politics is about who gets control and who leads, whereas governance is about how that power and authority is exercised. And I think we obsess too much about who gains control. Should it be APC? Should it be PDP? Who's going to come in 2023? Who's not going to come in 2023? But unless we fix the governance, it doesn't matter who comes. Whoever comes will be a victim of the system. They will be captured by the system. And so I think we need to be a lot more interested in issues of governance. I think many people, again, too many people obsess about the executive and not enough about the legislature. So people talk about, oh, we need restructuring. Well, the only people that can give us restructuring is the National Assembly. Nobody else can. It doesn't matter what else you do. There's no referendum in our system. There's no referendum in our constitution. The only people that can change the constitution to give us restructuring is the National Assembly. But we don't see the demand being put on our legislators in the same way as we see it being put on the executive. We don't say, oh, Mr. House of Rep member representing me, we need you to come back home and for us to tell you what to go there and advocate for. We don't have that. I'm not aware of more than, I don't know, one or two, maybe a handful of recall processes that have ever happened since 1999. So we don't sufficiently understand who can make a difference, and then we don't place enough pressure on those people that can make a difference to make that difference in the way that we want. And then the demand side, when you get it, tends to be more parochial in approach. So, Mr. Senator, go and argue for another university in our senatorial zone, regardless of the fact that we already have 5 that we cannot fund. You just go and argue against it, and come election, and you're not able to show the number of federal projects you have, quote unquote, attracted. You're in trouble as a politician. So there isn't that commonality of understanding about what we are looking for when we're talking about development. What does development mean beyond building roads? Because again, for many people, development is roads. Nobody else talks about anything else other than roads. You are judged on whether you build roads or not. That's the sole metric that people use to measure development. So I think we have all of these conversations to ensure that more of us understand what we're looking for, more of us understand who can help us get it, and therefore we can channel our advocacy towards those quarters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Smith, can we have a few more comments or specific questions?
Actually, we have some really fascinating comments here. There's a comment from Professor Olomola, who said, my approach to this discourse is to relay or is to address the idiomatic theme and come up with a conclusion that Nigeria is indeed in the eye of a perfect storm. This approach identifies the storm as the various challenges Nigeria is facing currently, things that shouldn't happen routinely, we can configure them in the form of COVID, recession, insurgency, or any other way we like. I have a comment here from Mr. Emeka Akpa that says one of these tiny storms Dr. Gbadebo Smith is talking about is the rising food prices. The world has witnessed major upheavals since the turn of the 21st century, fueled only by rising food prices. Nigeria may be next. I have Professor Emmanuel Ayede, who says policy interventions should take into consideration the logical connections of the various narratives in order to achieve inclusion and commitment of broad segments of society. Professor John Adeoti asked the question, how do we make the Nigerian elite see reason? In other words, how do we encourage open dialogue? Nigeria has experienced economic progress for a short while from 1954 to 1966. Can we ask ourselves what made this possible? Why are we averse to the necessary reforms that can refocus Nigeria on the path of progress?
Well, I think these are quite interesting comments. A lot of them speak to the issues, and some of them are actually suggestive of way forward and answers. But I would like to, stimulate another round of some of these comments. Now, democracy and power is.
I think Secretary Tumbi is frozen for the moment, so I'll take a look at the chat box again and identify one or two comments. FT says, a perfect storm is an especially bad situation caused by a combination of unfavorable circumstances. So we don't have a perfect storm just yet. To blame the populace for the ignorance that abounds is to add insult to injury. Yes, there is a degree of hegemony, but that won't always be the case. And Yemi Adamolekun says, agreed, we are and I think she's speaking to Professor Oloni Shakin's earlier comments. Agreed, we are misdefining the problem. A problem not well defined cannot be solved. Completely agree with Dr. Oloni Shakin that the fundamentals of End SARS are far from addressed, and we are quite dishonest about our culture of governance. I don't know if the senator is back.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Please go ahead.
Dr. Smith.
Yes.
I president for an emergency.
Yes.
Senate president has just summoned. Yes, I'll have to step down and go and attend to an emergency.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
To attend to an emergency in the Senate president's office right away.
Thank you very much for accepting to chair this occasion.
Thank you very much.
And we will brief you later as to how things have gone.
All right.
So
thank you very much, Joe.
Joe.
Thank you very much. I will be in the loop at a later time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Essentially, Joe, this comes down to you, me, and Miani.
I'm going
to take on the question of the issues raised around the perfect storms and the perfect storms and the one giant storm. I see Patience Oniha, DMO, that's Debt Management Office from Nigeria, who comments as follows: issues are very deep in our value system. discipline and expectations have changed rather dramatically for the worse. We need to articulate and prioritize issues and implement with clear direction and role models. Joe, do you want to speak to this question of role models and the leadership question? Because much of what we have discussed, much of my discussion were based around sort of technical fixes, but there's a whole adaptive side to this argument, which revolves around leadership and what the elite in the society, what the elite consensus looks like.
Well, I'll tell you something. On Sunday, a few days ago, I was in Enugu, and we're on the road, and we had to park to one side because the convoy of Prince Arthur Eze was approaching. And it was a convoy of 10 cars, several SUVs, two identical gold-colored Rolls Royces, an S-Class Mercedes, a pilot car with siren, and an ambulance. And I posted this and said, you know, I've just seen this convoy, and this is a private citizen. And the preponderance of the comments was about how good money is, and how much of a philanthropist he is, and how, you know, he has given this person $5,000 before, or $10,000 before.
In other words, he has earned the right to be exceptional to all governance rules.
None of the discussion was about having to force a fellow ordinary citizen, ordinary in quotes, off the road for him to pass. None of that came up in any of the discussions. And so when we talk about role models, who is the role model to the Nigerian? Me, who spent 4 years in government and declared my assets and tries to obey all the rules, or somebody that moves in a convoy of 10 cars and people of, who do you think is the role model among the two of us? Who would the young Nigerian like to be among the two of us? And so when we talk about role models, I agree completely with Patience that our value systems are in a lot of ways warped. You know, the kinds of people we look forward to as role models are people who have not built anything, people who have not run any business, people who have not demonstrated any capability other than the fact that they have either been in government or they have access to the wealth of the country. And I think that's what we need to start to focus on before we can start to think about the impact that our role models may be able to have.
I have a comment here from Abubakar Oladeji, who says that if all Nigeria's hopes of effecting the restructuring of the polity lies with the National Assembly, as alluded to by Dr. Abba, it simply means that all hope is lost. Remember that as main beneficiaries of the system and the status quo, it becomes inconceivable that we should expect members of the National Assembly to legislate against their own interests. In any case, members of this parliament have not proved to be nationalistic enough to rise above their selfish and parochial sentiments. How can Nigeria then weather this storm? Senator Odoma has a comment. He says, a good discussion so far. My concern is how to solve some of the pressing problems. A priority in avoiding the oncoming storm has got to be how to manage down the rather rapid rate of population growth. Are there any suggestions on acceptable methods of encouraging people to have smaller family size?
Let me comment first on the role of the National Assembly. And I agree completely with the issue the gentleman raised. And that is why I often say that we are in a one-chance vehicle that doesn't have brakes. That is how I describe our situation. Because people can say, oh, I disagree with Dr. Abba that it's only the National Assembly that can bring about restructuring. I'll be very interested if anybody can tell me how else we can get it, other than through the National Assembly. I'll be really, really interested in finding that out. Because the ground norm that governs our society, the Constitution, only the National Assembly can change it. The president cannot, the governors cannot. Only the National Assembly can change it. And so if you know of any other way, I'll be really, really interested in learning. Now, what do we do about it, knowing that the turkeys do not vote for Christmas? You know, the National Assembly will not vote for things that are inimical to their interests and to the privileges that they enjoy. And this is where it comes to the power of the citizen to hold their legislators to account. So the moment we realize that if we want restructuring, it's the National Assembly that can give it to us, not whether this minister has said this or said that, or not whether this person has done that or done the other. And we can hold our National Assembly representatives to account and say, we want you to go back. We want you to go back to Abuja on Sunday, on Monday, and advocate for this. And if within 3 months we don't see you advocating for it and pushing for it, we're going to initiate a recall of your candidature. That is the only time we will really start to make a difference in this issue of how our society is organized. I also agree completely with my brother and friend Ben Akabueze, the DG budget, that the issue is one of leadership, and that because we have had such poor leadership, the expectation of the followership has become so low. But this is the latent discontent that I talk about. The fact that the expectations are low doesn't mean that the populace is happy. That unhappiness is bubbling away under the surface all the time, and it just needs a trigger to bring it to the fore. And that's why I agree completely with Dr. Folarin Gbadebo-Smith that we need to look at those factors that are trigger points and try and de-escalate them. There are a number of things that the elite has done and got away with for so long that with the End SARS protest, it should start to rethink. Do we really need to goad these people in this way? Do we really need to flaunt our excesses in their eyes in the way that we've been doing? Can we be a bit more reserved? Can we be a bit more responsible? Can we be a bit more accountable? And unless we start to remove some of those escalating factors, that convergence that we all fear will happen sooner or later.
I must say that I agree with Senator Odoma that one of the major accelerators of the problem in Nigeria is going to be this question of family size. And does anyone have any thoughts on how to encourage people to have smaller families? Miani, perhaps you want to talk to this point, since family size seems to increase as you approach the northern borders of Nigeria, from Lagos to Maiduguri. The family size seems to increase almost on a straight line.
I think that first, there's no person here at a personal level more unqualified to respond. I do not have a family. So it goes to show that I'm contributing my part to de-escalating population explosion by simply not having one. Also, this is an area that I'm in no way an expert about. However, I think that in terms of addressing it, the bigger question should be, when people have children, you cannot at that point begin to address the issue of the challenge of the numbers that already exist. So any conversation or any thinking and solution or options around how do we slow down population growth should be looking at the future, at least from the medium to the long term. Education is, you cannot have a population that would re-engineer its thinking around the kind of families you raise while it remains uneducated, or better put, unenlightened. And the difference between an enlightenment and just education in terms of going to school is that enlightenment, if I would use like just traditionally what happened at some point in the history of Europe, the 18th century, they say there was enlightenment, is when rational thinking that looks at cause and effect and how it affects me as a person, as an individual, becomes the mainstream way people, educated or not, make most of their life's choices. And that's when you get enlightenment. And as such, you have to be able to be working on a trench on education where people, especially women and girl child education for Northern Nigeria is critical, because the more educated women are, the more they are able to have options as to what to do with their reproductive health and choices, in terms also just what to do with how they get married, to whom they get married, and what their response is to sometimes just rampant and irresponsible polygamy. But allied to that is simply also public enlightenment. When I was a kid, which is not like any person else here in the panel, just day before yesterday in the 80s, one of the biggest campaigns that succeeded real well, I remember, was when the then Minister for Health, Professor Luko Ransom Kuti, who was a fantastic public communicator, just went to town about HIV and family planning. We had King Sonny Ade Anoye Konwenu on TV with jingles, making advertisements. It was carried on radio, it was carried on air. There was such massive public enlightenment on oral rehydration therapy. I remember I was in primary 3, but I could explain it so well. 5 bottles of this, 1 bottle of this, 10 spoons of sugar, 1 spoon of salt. Stuck to me since I've been 6 till this day. So in terms of addressing it, something has to be done around education, not just in terms of its availability, but its quality, but also public, generally overall public enlightenment. But to sort of tie that and maybe go back a bit to an earlier comment around the National Assembly. I think that, and I'm totally agreeing with Dr. Abba, there is quite a lot of cynicism that discourages our imagination from thinking about what is possible. There's a young man, Samson Itodo, who I know from undergraduate days. And when I say I know, he is not even in any way, he ran up to me one day and said to me, you know, I know you when we were in university. I was a diploma student when you were in your final year. So we weren't even mates. Samson Itodo started Yaga with a bunch of others. It really proved to us as Nigerians that we can not only get the National Assembly to change the constitution on a matter, we can get 2/3 of all our state houses of assembly to pass a bill that would result in the change of the constitution. So if nothing else, for me, that is a pointer that these things aren't as far gone as we might think. However, they will not also be and won't get the result overnight. Samson and his crew worked on Not Too Young to Run for about 19 months before he got all the signing. Then there was a whole other advocacy, moving from the legislature to the executive. So the question around restructure, is possible to still approach the National Assembly with, and I think there's a need a lot of times to unpack what restructure means. It's been made overly sensational, and a lot of people would tell you I do not support restructure. I want A, B, C, D, E. And you look at them and say, yeah, you're just describing restructuring. The word itself has been a bit too weaponized. I think also just maybe to conclude is in terms of clear solutions, what I would always think around matters like this is two things. One, why we seem to keep going back in reference to what Joe Abbas and Dr. Abbas said around the same narrative. I had a professor who is now in his 70s who, when I was in university, said to me when they were graduating at the first set of Unilag, the then head of state, Yakubu Gowon, came to them and said, "You are the future of the nation." He was, by the way, roommates and classmates with our vice president. So our vice president was taught a long time ago, you know that. And my professor would say all the time, we're still waiting for that tomorrow because the same people are still running things. So why we seem to be in this vicious cycle, I think, is because there are a set of underlying issues that always catalyze the storm. They are structural, they are long-term. I'm talking about issues like, well, you know, the nature of the state that is basically rent-seeking, that is more distributive, that citizens, where citizens are not necessarily economic agents and they do not produce wealth. The state is funded from resources detached from the economic activities of citizens. What happens is it then leads to a weakened, if not near non-existent social contract. There's a popular thing around 3 ways to approach a social contract, where you either have one that has loyalty from both parties, where there is voice for both parties so that even if they disagree, there's room to disagree, or where one party gets so discouraged that they exit. Most Nigerian citizens mentally have exited Nigeria's social contract. And those structural reasons are the reasons that every time there is an opportunistic challenge, people get so discouraged because we seem to just be in an endless loop. But those structural challenges, we can't pause the day-to-day grind of a country to solve this structural challenge, which I think is sometimes what some proponents of restructure who say we should have this huge conference, like let's stop the country until we do this. It cannot happen. What it then means is that in addressing the immediate challenges like End SARS, which is a pointer to state failure around security and public service delivery generally. And every time we've got these proximate challenges that get to the front burner and become priority both to citizens and existentially important for government to attend to because it is now a burning issue, opportunity should always be seen in that crisis to not just address it so we go back to issues as normal, but how does this begin to help us address these underlying issues? Otherwise, what we would have is cosmetically addressing the issue until the next time it shows up in another guise and in another malady. So just the balance between being able to address the approximate challenges by very specific policy action options that a platform like this can offer, but informed with an understanding that there are underlying structural challenges that are the source of these smaller storms. And every time we address the smaller storms, let's take an opportunity to ask ourselves, how does this help us move the dial one step closer to disempowering the bigger storm and the source of this storm, so that one day we'll get to a point where the smaller storms does not become our life. Because what happens now is we basically are living under the tyranny of the immediate. No long-term planning, government doesn't have space to actually think far and do all of that, because in the immediate, there's always these little storms. So to be able to find that sweet spot to balance both and still deliver in a way that citizens come back into the social contract because they feel that there's room for them to be given voice. And just so to be clear, nobody gives up privilege casually. So for citizens, there's a question around the number of times we go to people in government and say, we want you to do this. We need you to do this. There's so much voice we can express without anybody's permission, like the End SARS movement has shown, and that should just continue. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a clear trend appearing here. Professor Akmanepo makes the point that a storm is a storm. Leave out the word perfect. The progress in the last 6 years has been very marginal. The misery index has been rising over time and now stands at about 86%. Do we really have a nation? The panelists have not alluded to the fact that part of the governance issue is one of over-centralization. There is a need to practice competitive federalism as we had it in the 60s, which I suppose goes back to the restructuring question. And this results in the restructuring the polity or restructuring the polity by default. There is a question that Nathan Williams asked, which is there's a need to answer the age-old question, who really is a Nigerian? Until we answer the question, and this is Emeka Akpa, until we answer the question of our Nigerianness, we will keep living in the eye of the storm, which may ultimately consume us. So all this speaks to a political economy bent. And so one has to ask the question, in this madness that is going on in Nigeria, where the elite seem to hold on to a very bad model, a destructive model, the state seems to be getting less and less capable over time. Who are the winners and who are the losers? Should Nigeria eventually collapse? I mean, only as a possible path on this road we are on. Should Nigeria collapse, who stands to win and who stands to lose? I think all this question of the Nigerianness, who is a Nigerian, speaks to the fact that there are many things happening around us which we are fairly silent about. Our borders, they are not porous. They're amorphous. We don't even know what the border is like, who is a citizen, who is not. We have governors inviting people across West Africa to come and pick up a Nigerian citizenship and so on. And yet the CIA agrees that should Nigeria, the Nigerian state fail, it will be a disaster for the entire sub-region. So Joe, please speak to this question that Miani very elegantly dodged, I think, about family size and link it to citizenship, how many people are, and basically back to Patience Oniha's point, are we about to use numbers to weaponize the demographic situation in Nigeria?
Thank you. Thank you, Falari. Let me first say that I agree completely with Professor Akpa-Nekwu about over-centralization. And if you do an analysis of Nigerian constitutions since 1960, each successive constitution has given more and more power to the federal government. The executive, the exclusive legislative list has grown with every constitution. And so we find ourselves in the ridiculous situation where all the lecturers in the country have been on strike for nine months. I don't know in which other country it happens other than ours. And I blame it on over-centralization. To my mind, we need to give the universities their autonomy. We need to give them grants, block grants. If a particular lecturer is not happy with the terms and conditions of his university, he applies to go to another university with better terms and conditions. We don't have a situation where the entire tertiary education system is put on hold for 9 months. I think it's a ridiculous situation that is as a result of over-centralization. We do the same thing with health. With health, we have the situation where the whole of the health system can shut down because everybody goes on strike. I don't think the I don't think the federal government should employ any doctors. I think the doctors should be employed by a health trust. And if they're not happy with their terms and conditions, they apply for jobs and go somewhere else. So we have this over-centralization. We cannot generate all the power we need, yet we will not allow others to do so. We cannot collect all the taxes we need, but we will not allow others to do so. So we're like dogs in a manger in the way that we run our system. And that's the kind of things we need to start to reflect on when we talk about restructuring. The structure we have, is it workable? And if it's not workable, what other structure should we have? And yes, I've seen people say, oh, you know, the way it's happened in other countries is through revolution or popular uprising. I'm not a fan of revolutions because every single revolution that I've studied has simply gotten rid of the people that were there and replaced them with a new set of people. And the things that caused the revolution in the first place carried on as if nothing has changed. I don't know of any society where a revolution has led to a complete change in the way that things are done that are sustained and lasted over a period of time. But there are a number of things you could do to get the National Assembly to do things differently. You could insist for each of the main political parties that restructuring is a key thing they must pursue in their agenda. You can vote for a president that commits to restructuring. So commits to having like a national conference similar to the one that we had in 2014. And I remember when we first went to brief President Buhari when he came into office, I said to him about the importance of pushing for the implementation of the National Conference report. And he said, well, I'm never going to read it. And we said, why? He said, because it was developed at a time that students were on strike and the selection of the delegates were flawed and all. And we said, okay, do your own then. And it's been 6 years. So if he's not happy with the one that have been done, let him convene his own. And let's have this discussion and give it to the National Assembly to implement. And if you have a party that has sufficient majority in the National Assembly, you can actually push through a lot of the aspects of restructuring that we're talking about. But back to your question, for Larry, about who is in Nigeria. Very, very important. There's very little we can do without a credible national identification system. Very, very little we can do. You can't plan properly. You're an economist, you know this. You can't plan properly without reliable demographics. And that's why you find that a lot of infrastructure that we're building is already too small by the time we complete it, because the population is growing faster than our gross domestic product. It's growing faster than our gross national income. So we do need to have a serious conversation about family size. And it is not as if, it is not one of pitching the North against the South or pitching one religion against the other. It's basically getting it across to people that, look, the more children you have, the lower the quality of life they're likely to have. It's really as simple as that. So it is irresponsible for you to, and wicked actually, for you to continue procreating children that you're not able to cater for. And we need the traditional rulers to help with this. We need the religious bodies to help with this. We need to have that serious discussion about the level of growth that we have as a country. And then, of course, the issue of our borders and the extent to which we even have any borders to start with. And like I said, it has to flow from a credible national identification system. Granted, when we start the national identification system, which I'm privileged to be part of the committee working on, there will be parts of the data that are not clean. There will be. There will be areas in which we may even be surprised that we don't have as many as we thought we did, because when it comes to elections, people will inflate the numbers. When it comes to taxation, people will deflate the numbers. And so having a serious conversation about our national identity will give us a better handle on what kind of country we are. And then who is a Nigerian would flow into the kind of constitution we then develop about what we want as a country. That would be my view.
Senator Shola Akinede comments as follows: 70 to 90% of our problems stem from corruption, corruption-driven misallocation, waste, and structural kleptocracy. A perfect storm is a product of unusual combination of events, not individually dangerous, but combined to produce a disaster. The drivers of our situation are individually dangerous, and the combinations and results clearly predictable. We are giving too much credence to the political elite when you attribute our situation to a perfect storm. We, the elite, simply lack the political will to address the fundamentals. By the way, just so I don't forget, could you please announce, that's to me, that there is a feedback poll that will show up on your participant screen. It would be helpful if you could respond to the poll before the webinar ends. My sense of the discussion we've been having is that there isn't that much that we are not aware of. The real, the crux of our situation is, one, what to do about it. I have argued that we need to slow down the accelerators. Some of these accelerators, like population growth, can in fact be slowed down. The question is whether we have the will to do this or not. There's the entire spectrum, from the China one-child policy to the member of the House of Reps that showed up to boast to Nigerians about having 27 children. There's everything in between. But Joaba makes a very valid point, and it has been proven empirically that the number of children that a family has after the third child is exponentially connected to poverty. So number 4 child makes you poor, number 6 child makes you twice as poor. By the time you get to number 9 child, you're already facing a disaster. By child number 16, there's no story to be told. You're just going to have to put them out on the street. And that is for a middle-class family. Imagine what happens when poor people begin to procreate in an uncontrolled fashion. I still think, though, that we as Nigerians almost subscribe to a culture of silence around certain issues. We don't want to contend, we don't want to offend the sensibilities of the very political economy establishments that take advantage of the situation we are in. Clearly, there is the tendency in Nigeria to create monopolies. We've just witnessed a situation where there was an uproar when the land borders were open for one specific company. I remember Mr. Atido Peterside arguing that one of the things we are doing in Nigeria is that we are destroying the market economy and creating monopolies in its place. Should Dangote be the only businessman left standing in Nigeria, What will the economy look like? Should Dr. Gbadebo Smith own all the refineries in Nigeria and all the tomato paste? What will the economy look like? All that will happen is that prices will rise. Monopoly economics is a known quantity. Yet we keep approaching this thing almost as if it's a desirable goal, and nobody wants to. More importantly, nobody wants to talk about these things. We hide behind religious quotes. We hide behind our ethnic situation. Long and short, we all agree that the situation we face has been long in the making. If we don't talk about it, whether you agree or disagree with Dr. Abba as to speaking to your legislature and legislators and making them do what you want, there is still the question of what the followership subscribes to. I think it was very telling that when you, Joe, that when you pointed out this question of being driven off the road by an individual convoy, an individual's convoy, all the comments you got was in praise of the guy who owned the convoy. Your rights didn't seem to matter. The contribution to governance or the lack thereof didn't seem to matter. So who exactly are we speaking to when we have these discussions in Nigeria? Surely it is not an audience or a population that does not even share similar values with what we are talking about. Perhaps we should start with a poll and ask the people whether they prefer this type of governance or not. Never mind what we think should be happening. Joe, please. Some last comments before we round up. We have like 8 minutes. Yes.
Well, it's why these kinds of dialogues are vitally important, and why the composition of the discussants is just as important. So it's a matter of regret that Senator Adetunbi is no longer with us, but Senator Udo Udoma is still with us, and is instructive what he said. He said very clearly that that actually, when you pressure your National Assembly to do things, they actually do them. He said on the issue of National Assembly, let me say that the National Assembly does respond to popular demands. If people feel strongly about any changes, a lot can be achieved if they can energize themselves across the country, identify the particular change they're looking for, and indicate the particular legislation they want amended. What tends to happen is that people simply complain generally on the particular issue of restructuring. There simply has not been a consensus on what people want. Some want a return to the former regions. People tend to agree on the need for restructuring. And that is somebody who has been a senator, somebody on the inside. And that's why it's important to have these kinds of conversations and have the mix of, technical people like yourself, myself, people who are in the legislature, people who are in academia, people who are in civil society, so that we can debate some of these difficult issues, and even inform ourselves, because we could class ourselves on this forum as members of the elites. Well, a number of people will class us on this forum as members of the elite. If among ourselves, we can even foster a better understanding of what change is required and how to go about that change. Because like Senator Udo Udoma said, everybody recognizes that there's a need for change. What a lot of people are lacking is information about how to go about that change. And that is what I believe that dialogues like this can give us. So I think we need to talk more. I think we need to address more of these issues. I think we need to gather the right sorts of people that can then lead this discussion beyond this particular platform. Thank you.
Just by way of information, NISER as an institution is going to be undertaking some research, actually major research on the restructuring question. We hope to present what different scenarios of what restructuring can look like, what the implications are, and for each scenario, probably actually put out an economic impact statement on what it will look like. All this within the context of a population that is growing as rapidly as we are going to experience. I'm going to at this point ask Miani to give a vote of thanks to the people who have attended. If we've not been able to take your questions, I apologize, but we have in fact run out of time. So Miani.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. There's been a lot of very, very interesting questions and comments and thoughts that touch on different aspects of Nigerian life. Someone, I think Emeka, put a question which I responded to say I think is the most important of all if we want to get partial about things that matter most to us, which is around what it means to be Nigerian, not just from a point of view that Dr. Abba mentioned on how we identify Nigerians for the purpose of planning, but the nature of how Nigeria relates with its citizens. We will not get into that, even though personally I agree. I think that building a citizenship based on belonging to a subgroup has set us in a zero-sum equation of resource allocation, which is part of where we went through a civil war for it. We've not recovered from it because we learned nothing. But to say that this roundtable today and the conversation we've had is sort of the context setter for the series that would follow after, that would still continue to work with NISER on, that would be, if you may, a bit like a deep dive on a number of these issues that have been outlined. So if we're unable to, or if we're not able to talk about it now, please note that further down the line, when we get back from Christmas and New Year, we would be having more series like this that will touch on a lot of these issues and allow us to focus more on each one of them, deconstruct in terms of challenges, reflect on options to present in the short to medium to long term, and what that means. We would be working to put together an outcome document that would NISER will be providing support that would be directed at different stakeholders, those in government and executive, those in government, in legislature, those in civil society, those in media. We are hoping that we should be able to put together some kind of virtual community platform to keep this kind of conversations going, so the rest of us can not just share our thoughts here, but continue going. And so to say, while I say thanks for today's session and how wonderful and it's engaging and riveting it's be, this is not an end of it. If you've not gotten a chance to get deep as much as you want, do not be discouraged. Go and reflect real hard and arm yourself over Christmas, and we'll hit the ground running in January. Like I mentioned earlier, LEAP is a part of 3 pillars that constitute PERL, which is FCDO's governance reform program in Nigeria. And I head the LEAP arm that is focused on learning and research. I have 2 colleagues who I work with very closely. Mr. Ifeanyi Peters, I believe, is on leave, so was unable to make it. And I hope I'm not just shaving his head in his absence. Heads ARC. ARC focuses on the supply side of governance and engaging with government institutions to find ways to better enhance their capacity to deliver. My colleague Adia Ode, I believe I saw you earlier and I looked at the participants, it's still the same number. So Adia is here. Adia heads the engaged citizens part of our work that focuses on providing the right channels to engage citizens and citizen representatives, and the third, and members of the media, amongst others, so that citizens' voice isn't just taken into consideration in implementation, but even in issue identification and priority setting of government's priorities as to what truly is important to its citizens. So we work together as tripartite to provide ways through partnerships with, like this one with NISER, that reform would happen in Nigeria's public service generally. I again thank our speakers for you can always tell when people get an invitation and then go prepare for it. And this is one of such. It's been wonderful. Thank everyone for staying throughout. Dr. Smith, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to work with you in this all-important space. For us, it's a privilege to be part of contributing in whatever tiny way to the larger discourse of how our country, Nigeria, becomes better. We thank you very much, and I wish everyone a good rest of your week, and you'll hear from us very soon. Back to you, Dr. Smith, for closing. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for staying the course. Thank you, Joe, for taking the time and absorbing what should have been Fumi's questions. I will talk to Senator Adetumbi later about how best to get our communications across to the people who have attended on this platform. It's been a truly enlightening discussion, and I hope that future discussions, especially on this webinar series, will in fact tackle some of the more difficult questions, those same questions that we have been sort of reticent about addressing. Thank you, everyone, and good evening.